Evidence. Tonight, see what truly exists inside the world of the paranormal. Inside. Join the discussion and review some of the best paranormal evidence captures from a wide variety of experienced and up-and-coming investigators. See and hear what they capture, where they captured it, and how they captured it. Right now on Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence. My name is Chris.
I'm Tony.
I'm Cherie.
I am Lourdes.
And I am Ron, and hopefully I'm not lagging.
You guys were.
You were. Neither one of you were moving through the whole conversation, but you're back now.
Your audio's coming through.
Yeah, but it's not a radio show, so it sapped all my enthusiasm to be here when this happens every week, because I don't know why we're getting it all of a sudden. It really does.
It's usually not too bad, though.
Funny.
Are we all lagging now?
No, I'm messing with you.
There's some kind of like a delay.
Yeah.
Hello, Melissa.
I don't know what it is.
Did everybody have a good week?
Yes.
It feels like another one started.
Yeah. It's like, God, just when it ends, it begins all over again. What the hell?
We had a good weekend. We was at the Hoover House, the historic Hoover House in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, and that was good for Valentine's. We had a good time.
Yeah, it was really good. We got some good direct radio voice sessions and recordings. We were looking for specific information they wanted us to get, and we got it. So we're excited to go over that.
Cool.
Very cool. We
YMCA.
Investigated the haunted YMCA, got some great DRV responses. The problem was that there were not lots, maybe 6 or 8 other people, but they just would not stop talking. So I kept shutting the recorder off just because I couldn't even focus on what was coming through the machine, let alone doubling it on the recording. So I haven't even listened to it yet. We'll see how overpowering it is. But
Sorry, I'm too friendly. I love talking to people.
no, I mean it was fine, but I don't think we'll probably be able to pull a lot from it, just because even though the voices kept answering, it just wasn't clean enough to probably be able to pull from.
Well, at first we thought that all your settings all gone. Oh my gosh.
I opened it up. Everything was gone. Everything.
Every settings.
When you went to performance, I had like 40 some different presets in there. Everything was gone. I freaked out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's weird. Even tonight in my browser, the login information, everything for StreamYard that's saved in Chrome, I had to reset it and put everything back in all over again. We didn't have any problems with the DRV settings, and I tell you, when we do events, public events like that, I put one recorder really almost too close to the speaker, because I know that you have the possibilities of people just talking through it, and I don't understand. I guess I always try to say it in the beginning, but you have the opportunity to potentially dialogue with spirit or have this really fantastical experience. I don't understand why when it starts, people just will break out into conversations and completely miss the point. That's like going into a soccer field with all your pads on and your shin guards and your spiked cleats, and then pulling out an umbrella and sitting back and reading the book. It's like, that's not what you're there to do, and you're not doing it right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was still fun, but
yeah,
we suffered from that standpoint, because, we're not even talking about somebody standing 10 feet away, 15 feet away. They were literally right behind me. Yet, no. And I was like, oh, man.
I mean, sometimes it's understandable, because if they hear something that's relevant to them, they get all excited and they break into conversation. But the thing is, they drag the conversation too long. They're like, all right, all right.
Or they're having completely unrelated conversation.
That happens to them, yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
But
But
it was still fun. It was still a good time.
But Chris, do you have anything for your weekend before we? Because I was going to move on with.
No, we
with our
just did the
intro.
the old sappy romantic Valentine's Day thing. We didn't do any paranormal stuff.
Well, the
Just come
semi
out to
romance
dinner.
thing is beautiful.
Hey, Rod.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is awesome.
Spoiled
Yeah.
mama for the weekend, but other than that,
Oh.
no, we didn't do any paranormal stuff.
Oh, well, let me say this. We addressed something just now that's important to us. When we do a live event, something that detracts from the potential captures and quality of the event. But tonight's show is about the very opposite of that. Tonight's show is about something or somebody who, from our experience, when added to the event, the quality, the amount of captures, and the experience overall are freaking fantastic. We've had the opportunity to work with our guests tonight in the field a couple times. In 11 years of doing this kind of stuff, probably the most impressive gallery reading I've ever seen a medium perform. He did it to Shanley. And he's just personable with people. He interacts. He deserves to have fans and followers because he knows how to deal with people and make the experience fun. So I'll let you introduce him. But I just wanted to say that because when we have the opportunity to work with these people in the field, we're not just sharing their evidence. We're sharing, the experience of what it's like to work with them and encouraging you, if you have the chance to do that, to definitely go to one of their events.
Good, Melissa.
Cool.
So without further ado, we are about to bring on Scotty Davis. Scotty is a paranormal investigator, better known as Scotty the NJ Medium. And what's most intriguing about Scotty is the first time that a spirit contacted him and just popped in there, in Scotty's words, he was shampooing his hair. So let's bring him in and talk to Scott and see what that story is about. Everybody, welcome.
Hey, what's up?
Scotty.
Hi, Scotty.
Hello.
Hey, indeed, I was showering. So, right off the bat, if you're wondering if spirits are watching you in the shower, the answer is yes. They don't mind you in the birthday suit. It doesn't bother them. It's nothing they haven't seen before. So,
Man.
yeah, that's the way this whole thing started. When people ask me about being a medium or a psychic and stuff, I always tell them I didn't ask. I didn't go out seeking this stuff. I was highly into the paranormal, like most people who are doing this. And, I came home from a shift one day. It was a long day. I was just getting ready to go have dinner. I hopped in the shower, did my thing. And while I'm in there, I just had this crazy voice that is not like my normal inner dialogue. And as you said, it did just pop in there. And, it gave me a bunch of information that I was like, wow, this is really weird that I'm hearing this. And I at first was like, well, I'm going to lose my job because they're not going to let me come back if I talk about hearing voices. But then something really intriguing happened. The voice gave me a direction, and it said, this is going to be for your mom's friend, so-and-so. So write this stuff down. I want to give you more information, and then I'd just like you to bring it to her and tell her I'm okay. And I was like, okay, this is going to be strange, but I like to take risks and do interesting things. So that's exactly what I did. I wrote down the information that this person gave me, and it was really cool because my first experience into this was a grand slam of mediumship. This person described a wedding with a blue classic sports car that was there. He told me his name was Pop, or that's what everybody called him. And one of the biggest pieces of evidence that he gave me was this really cool thing about a photograph of a man in a tuxedo standing next to a woman in a pink dress with white pearls. She had brown hair, and I could smell cupcakes as he was describing her, and he gave me her name. And I went to my mom, and I said, hey, do you think your friend so-and-so would be interested in hearing from her dad if, like, there's, like, a message? And my mom was like, of all the people, yes, that person would absolutely be interested. So I got in contact with her, and I went over to her home, and I said, here's the information that was presented to me. What do you think? And she said, well, the blue classic sports car is interesting at the wedding because this weekend we were at a wedding, and the wedding party rented a blue classic sports car, and they all took pictures around it. And I was like, well, why'd your dad talk about it then? And she was like, oh, because he would have been there. It was his family. He would be there for sure if he was still with us. And I was like, okay. And, she confirmed that everybody called him Pop. And then the really interesting thing was that I talked about the photograph that he had shown me with the man in the tux and the woman. And she said, my mom lives underneath me in the apartment under us. Let's call her up and tell her what's going on. And maybe she knows what you're talking about. So she told her mom. Her mom came up. We explained what was happening. Her mom disappeared for 5 minutes and came back. And she had this big old wedding album in her hand. It had like 20 years of dust on it. She blows it off, opens it up. And right in the middle of this book from whenever they got married, pretty long time ago, was a picture of a man in a tux and the woman in the pink, just as I described. And it actually happened to be Pop on his wedding day, standing next to his mom, Anna. And the reason I had smelled the cupcakes is because she baked every single day of her life. And she was in the pink dress with the pearls and the hair, the whole 9 yards. So from that moment on, my curiosity was piqued beyond anything that had ever gotten my interest in my life. So I dove headfirst into it. I watched every medium show or psychic show I could find. I started reading every book I could get my hands on, and then I started putting it into action and testing it, saying, well, if it happened once spontaneously, can I make it happen again and again? And here we are about like 10 years later, and it's still going. So that was the first foray into it.
Wow.
I know it was a lot to digest, but that's like the whole story. It's crazy.
I'm still freaking out that they can see you in the shower.
Yeah. And I don't think
I've always wondered that.
Yeah, they don't care. That's actually where I get a lot of messages. I don't know why. But they love it. They're just like, hey, what's up, man? What are you doing? You see you're naked again. Let's chat. Out of a rom-com where people see ghosts. It's terrible. But it is what it is.
So, Scott, you can say no, and I probably shouldn't have brought this up on the show. I should have asked you before the show, but are you willing to share with your guests what you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. I am a law enforcement officer for my day job, which is totally fine. And as I always say to my fans, former United States Marine as well. So it's good. I'm very well grounded is what I like to say. I'm very in the world. I try to keep things that are woo-woo as un-woo-woo as possible. And that's really when I had that spontaneous message is really what drove me forward to be like, what the heck else could possibly be creating this? So I'm still of the mind that I don't know that it's spirit. I don't know if it's science. I just know that it is a thing, and I'm willing to explore it and try to understand it better. And it seems to help people have peace when you can say like their loved one is coming through and bring really clear evidence of them coming through in really specific ways. And if I can keep doing that and making people happy through doing it, then that's what my mission is to do.
Very cool.
Yeah, and Scotty, you mentioned the spirit and the science. Another thing I think is important for people to know. Maybe you can explain why this hit high on your radar of priorities. But you and I have not only been at events together, we've had some insane conversations with people at different times, and it was very based on stuff that had everything to do with quantum physics, the consciousness and stuff. And you're not just about, as you would put it, the woo-woo, but you do in fact educate yourself on other aspects of what could be happening, what is applicable to known science, what is unknown to science, whatever it is. Why is that important to you, and not just going with the woo?
To understand something is to try to understand it from every possible angle. I listen to the people who believe it is spiritual or religious, and I take something from that. I listen to the people who talk about the quantum physics and quantum mechanics, and I take something from that. I listen to the people who talk about it in the most basic forms, and I take something from that. There's something to be learned from every person when they have valuable input to put in. So I don't neglect anything that comes in. So the more that I understand from each one, the more rounded an opinion I can have, and pass on to other people, and maybe in terms that they can understand a little bit easier than, the 4-hour lecture I listened to the professor at Rutgers give on quantum mechanics in the 13th dimension, because that was a lot to digest. It took a couple hours to listen to it, but as I went through it and I heard him talking, this very highly educated man talk about these different dimensions and the things that could possibly exist, and get into string theory and those sorts of things, it really resonated pretty hard with what I do, because so much of what they talk about is theory, and what I'm doing is theory that just, it's happening, but we can't prove how it's happening or why. We just know that it does. So that's sort of that weird space where that science exists, and where I'm doing what I do, and basically what you guys are doing, what you do as well. And all paranormal investigators, ones who are taking it seriously, you're bringing something to the table, and we're trying to figure out the how and the why. We just know that it's happening. We've accepted that. Now we're trying to get to it. And the more that we understand from these educated people who are not studying the paranormal, but it applies, and we bring it to our basket, the better we can be. So that's why it's important for me to understand as much as I can.
Good point.
No,
Very
that's
good point.
that's brilliant. I think I agree. We've been saying that now that we believe we've moved to causality, not if things are happening anymore, and that's absolutely important to be able to explain that. And I think that the role you fill, and we try to fill the role, and I know Tony and Cherie and Chris, the same thing, is what's called the academic layperson partition. Because a lot of the people who are those educated science people who know the methodologies of science and such, they're not the ones that are out there on feet on the ground doing the actual research and the experimentation and aggregating the EVPs and voices. They're not. They're theorizing a lot of it, but if you can bridge the gap between those two worlds, that's important.
Yeah, 100%. And doing what I do, I've learned a lot about so much. I've learned so much. Earlier when you were introducing me, and thank you for the beautiful introduction, you said that I learned, I know how to deal with people and individuals and personalities, and that came a lot from doing this as well, being completely open to anybody and everybody, and where they came from in life, who they were in life, the people that I'm speaking to that are living where their situation is, and having empathy for them and understanding them. And I learned a lot about that. I think when I was 20 years old, I would have never been good at this, because the world was to me so harsh in one way, and I didn't understand people as well as I do now. So all of that stuff as a young man faded away, and it opened up this huge horizon to the world around me. And I think that my experience in the military and being exposed to the people overseas and real hardships, that helped open this gift up a little bit more. And then certainly being a law enforcement officer, every single day that I go to work, I just deal with people on their worst days. And the only way to deal with that is to be as neutral as possible and understanding, and give help when you can. So those sorts of things play into mediumship in a huge way, because I always want to leave somebody better than I found them. And if that's a paranormal case, where somebody who's hired me to sit with them at their dining room table and talk to their grandma or their mom or somebody, it's the same. So whatever they're bringing to me, whatever trauma they have, it's up to me to understand how to take that and reflect it in a way that is positive and healing, and leave them better than I found them, which is really something I could have only done in the last 10 years after a lifetime of experience of my own.
It's a great outlook and a great
and that's why we
great mental state to have, to be doing what you're doing. So that's awesome.
Thanks. Not to bring it too heavy, we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about, but yeah, that's sort of just like how I got here. That's how we got things rolling,
Well, no, and it says a lot, Scott, with your law enforcement background. I mean, I was a reserve deputy in Maricopa County for 10 years in Phoenix, so I completely understand and see where you're coming from with that. It's explain to these guys and explain to our audience how you fight that with that law enforcement fact-driven background, How do you fight that with the message that you're getting every day as a medium?
So when it comes to the type of medium that I'm what I consider an evidentiary medium, which means that when people come through, they need to bring me specific information about who they are. And if I don't have specific information coming through that can definitely link the person on the other side to who I'm speaking with and somebody that they definitely knew, then it's not good for me. So the bar was set really high with that first spontaneous reading, and it pretty much has to meet that bar every single time. So with law enforcement, you have to say, here are the facts, and that's what you have to bring into a case, and you have to follow it all the way through to the end with those same exact facts, and they have to be the same and line up specifically, or else you don't have a case. And it's the same thing with the mediumship. So if one of my favorite ones to talk about is, I always say, I won't talk to you really about how much your grandma loved to cook unless she was a cook. So one of my favorite ones that I ever did during a reading was this woman came through, and I was having a conversation with her, and her family wasn't completely sold that I was talking to the woman I said I was. And all of a sudden I lost vision in my left eye, just went completely black like I had closed it. And in that instant, I saw a glass jar shatter and a piece of glass hit this woman. And I said, okay, your grandmother, when she was younger, dropped a glass jar. A piece of glass shot from the jar and hit her in the eye, and she went blind for the rest of her life out of that eye. And they were like, holy crap, that is our grandma for sure, because that's exactly what happened. So that's the sort of thing that we have to bring, or else it's probably not good information.
Very nice.
So there was a question in the audience. They were asking if your psychic medium abilities help with any of your actual law enforcement cases?
So the answer as of right now is no. And the reason for that is because I could never go to a judge and be like, I had a psychic vision of this. I can't bring that. It's not proof. Now, I have assisted with some, I don't want to say too much, but I've assisted with giving information that backed up the details of cases that were helping detectives move forward in a way that they were like confident, because I had no knowledge of the case and gave them information that fit their theory or what they thought the evidence actually was. And on one case, I did a reading for a woman over the phone, and the next day I had a law enforcement officer call me and basically grilled me about how I knew what I knew, down to the make and model of a vehicle, where the person was located, and his name. And he was like, there's no way. And I was like, dude, let me tell you something. I'm also a law enforcement officer. I was like, you can call my people and they'll tell you the same thing. You wouldn't be the first guy calling and asking if I've been going through records. I was like, this was a phone call for somebody I've never met in my life, and I just had a really strong message come through. And he was like, you know what? I believe you. And he said it was such a positive affirmation for him that he was headed in the right direction, that he was going to stay on it. So that was really cool. And it's just one of those things. So I haven't done it for myself, but it could help. And maybe once I'm retired, I could do it a little bit more.
Thanks for answering that.
Yeah.
It's nice to have somebody like Scott on the show. Gives a different point of view from a mediumship with a law enforcement background and an investigator background all mixed together, which is something that we don't normally see. So I'm glad we got you on, Scott. Really glad we got you on.
Oh, that's awesome.
I am the whole Scooby gang. Let me tell you. All of them. Yeah, I also like Scooby snacks in the dark.
Real quick, before we get into
Go ahead, look.
Before we get into the evidence, because this is something that I've been wondering about. You said that a lot of the messages comes when you're in the bathroom, right? So the few occasions when I have things happen to me, it's also in the bathroom. You think it's something to do with the tiles or something, the porcelain, maybe?
No, you know what it is?
There's something with bathrooms.
It's because it's a place of vulnerability and being relaxed. And oftentimes the water is running, which is a great conduit. It creates white noise. It puts your brain at rest, and it brings up your theta waves, right? Which is where your dream and stuff happen. So that's what I call the spirit wave. And it's perfect. It brings it right up. You get relaxed. You know that you're in there to chill out. You're going to do your thing. And that's when messages will come. That's all there is.
Okay.
It's a
All right.
great answer.
White
I
noise in
never
your
thought of it that
Yeah.
way, but
Yeah,
that's a
it's
great
actually
answer.
interesting you say that, because I got a message last week that we won't talk about on here today, but I was actually at work and I was out in the warehouse. Big and it was weird because I was by myself. I was just chilling, you know, I was relaxed. I was at work. I was, you know, doing stuff just to get it done. And the other day I walked back in there and I'm like, well, why in the hell would it come to me in here? Well, I noticed that we have a propane heater that hangs from the ceiling in the warehouse, and it's constantly running, creating a white noise.
Yep.
And it's also it's kind of a relaxing hum a little bit too. So it's weird that you say that, because I actually made that connection the other day.
Yeah, you'll probably feel your if you were to stand there and just take a deep breath, you'd probably feel your whole body go into a relaxed state, even while standing. And your brain will just match that vibration, and you'll pick up all the information out of the white noise.
Wow. That's interesting. Very interesting.
Nice.
All
We have
right.
a whole
Well,
bunch of people heading to.
yeah, everybody's going to the
Yeah,
bathroom, turn on the shower.
All right, don't get in trouble with your spouse though. My wife yells at me. I run the water bill up sometimes. Just sappy.
got a whiteboard on the shower wall, taking notes.
That is so funny.
That's
That's a good idea.
We're going to start with the pictures that you sent.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
And we're going to bring them up and we can talk through these. So let's start with this one.
My man, this is one of my favorite photographs, because this is such proof that the spirit world knows more than we do. And the story behind this is I was hired to do a phone reading, so no Zoom or anything like that. I'm just on the phone with this woman. And I connected with one of her friends, I believe, first. And then secondly, I had this man come through. And he didn't look like this. He looked older to me. And you're all familiar with The Walking Dead, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
The Negan character.
Yeah, we just watched it tonight.
Sure. So I said to this lady, you know, there's this guy who's coming through and he's got a leather jacket on. He's very like Negan from The Walking Dead. He's got a lot of charisma and personality. He's on a motorcycle. And I don't know if I included his name here, but his name was something simple like John Smith. And I gave her the name. And I was like, I think he actually was like the leader of a motorcycle gang too. And she was like, wow, I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar to me at all. I don't know who that could be. And I said, okay. So what I always do is I write down all the information. And at the end, I took a photo of it and I sent it to her in an email. So the next day, she sent this photograph back to me in my email. And she said, you know, I'm just reconnecting with my biological father. And I spoke to him last night after our reading. And I told him the description you gave me. And he was like, oh, that's your grandpa. That's your grandfather. No doubt about it. He's like, that's my dad. So he sent this photograph over, and there he is, and confirmed the name was the right name that I gave. He was indeed a motorcycle enthusiast and the leader of a biker gang. And I don't know if you could tell, but this gentleman had a ton of personality, and he basically was just like, that was definitely your grandfather. He's was that guy that your guy described. So she didn't know her grandfather. She had never met him. There was no reason for him to want to come through, except for he came through and was like, hey, I'm here, and you know, you should know about me, and here's a little bit about me. And when she talked to her dad, this is what he sent back. So I thought it was another really fantastic piece of photograph evidence to match the reading. And that was it. So that's a gentleman.
Wow.
That's really cool.
Neat,
That's
right?
very cool.
That was very neat.
And people ask all the time, like, well, why do some people come through that I don't really even care about? And I wish I could, I hate to say it like that. It sounds crass, but people say it all the time. Like, hey, this guy this is Jimmy. I think he drowned when he was like 8. And he's like saying hello to you. And they're like, oh, I went to school with a guy named Jim, and he passed when he was 8 from drowning. And I was like, well, he's here. And they're like, but why? So I don't know. I just cast the net out. around you and I see who's around and they come in. And that's the sort of thing that happens. Of course, with that gentleman, he had a DNA link to her. So he probably wanted to come and say hello. And she was rediscovering her roots. So it would make sense to me that that gentleman would want to come in and say hello. That's pretty neat.
Right.
Can I answer Giuseppe's question? Do you ever get a person that you just don't want to read, and if so, why? So Giuseppe, thanks for that. That's a really good and insightful question. There are no people ever that I have rejected from doing a reading. However, I have found that I have a great deal of difficulty doing readings for women who are pregnant. As a matter of fact, I still have no idea why. But I think it has something to do with an immense amount of protective energy over the child that they're bearing. And I don't reject anybody. I say, come one, come all. I like to see what people's lives are about. But I noticed very early on, I would sit with young ladies or ladies and I'd be like, I got nothing from you. It's like trying to read a wall. And then I put two and two together, and the one lady once was like, well, I'm pregnant. And I was like, oh, maybe that's it. And then I noticed every time I didn't get a reading off a woman, I'd say, are you pregnant? And they'd be like, oh my God, nobody knows that. So, well, I only know because I can't have spirit won't come through. Completely blocked up like a radar jammer. So that's just an interesting thing. But I hope that answers his question.
Interesting.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So
Weird,
I remember
It is.
Go ahead, Ron.
I was just going to thank you. Sorry, because we're lag central over here. From an investigative standpoint, that's something that we're all supposed to do as far as any data we aggregate or any experiences is look for trends and look for commonalities that might make sense in the picture. So that right there is an example of how you're supposed to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting, right? I have another one that tends to happen every once in a while if I do a phone or Zoom reading. This is a weird one. If somebody resides in like a large apartment building, it's very difficult for me to tune into them over the phone. Oftentimes I'll ask them if I'm having a lot of difficulty if we could reschedule and they go to their car and go to like a park or something. So that way I can tune into them specifically because sometimes when I cast that net out, I feel like I'll get like their neighbors and their friends of friends and friends and people in the building. And I figured that out because one time the lady was like, listen, you have pulled in 5 people and I know who they all are. I've lived in this building for 40 years and they all are different people that have lived here, but none of them are my relatives. And I was like, okay, you need to go to a park or something in the next time. And she did. And we redid it and it was perfect. So who knows? I don't know why, but it's just one of those things.
Interesting.
That is interesting. Wow. That's fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an explanation.
I know of Scotty for the condense of that story I prefaced in the intro was at the Shanley. You did a reading for people organically at the Shanley, and then you said, so everybody feels included. I'll go to you specifically if you didn't get something organically, and I just ask you who you want to come through. And you had the one couple, remember with the roller skates thing, and you were completely wrong until you weren't. When it got back to the spouse, it made sense that the other one didn't get, and that's a good example too of not judging and being too hasty. When you kept saying, they keep telling me that this is coming through. I don't know if it means anything, but they keep showing me this, and it was totally off, and then it wasn't, and I was like, that's freaking amazing.
So through doing this, I actually have a video on YouTube about it, and I said being wrong is okay because you're probably not. If you're confident enough in your connection rate is good and your evidentiary rate is good, you're probably not wrong. It's probably just that either you're not saying the right combination of words that are meaningful and correct to the person you're talking to, or they are not understanding exactly what it is that you're trying to say. Because remember, we all have different perspectives in life, and we have different ways that we were raised and different values. So sometimes we say things differently than somebody else might say them to us. So I believe that the person that we were talking about, the woman, if I can remember correctly, they kept showing me roller skates, and it was really important. And I kept saying it, and I was like, I'm watching unboxing, putting on roller skates, and they were both like, we don't know. So we went around the whole room. I did the rest of the readings, and I came back to them, and I said, I'm looking at you, and I have to tell you that I'm looking at the lacing up of these roller skates, and now I'm looking at this really dark wooded room, and I can see the panels, and I feel like roller skating is super important. And all of a sudden, it dawned on them. They were like, "Oh, we were just at the such and such hotel, and it has the first and oldest roller skating rink in the world." And that's where the connection had come from. So we were able to put that together.
Wow.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was neat. And it was cool because it was there with a lot of people, and it was neat to have a lot of folks witness that sort of thing. But yeah, again, so being wrong a lot isn't actually being wrong. That's why I take good notes while I'm doing it, and then snap the photo and send it to my clients, because they will come back months later. One of my favorite stories of this is this woman's mom came through, and she kept talking about a special bottle, and I'm like, I don't know, lady. I was like, she won't shut up about it. I'm just gonna draw a bottle. The bottle's important. I wrote next to it in a note, and I was like, if anything ever comes of a really important bottle, please let me know, because this is gonna eat me up. So maybe that was like December. So 6 months later or so, it was July. Yeah, it was the beginning of July. I get an email. She said, I thought about this while I was at a family barbecue. My dad and my sisters and I, we were talking about mom. We're sitting around the table having a good time, and we're just talking about mom and the good times. And my dad gets up from the table, and he goes downstairs in the cellar, and he comes back up with this old ratty toolbox, and he puts it on the table. He opens up the toolbox, and he takes out a cloth. And inside the cloth, he takes the cloth off, and there's this bottle of Midori liquor, and I guess liqueur. And he says, this is your mom's bottle of Midori, and it's only half drank because she didn't really like alcohol, but this is what she'd have when she wanted something. So let's all do a shot in memory of mom. So nobody knew that he had saved this special bottle of Midori except for him. So when they brought it out and toasted to mom with her bottle, it made sense then. And this was 6 months later.
Wow.
So that was a really important moment for her, because the healing happened when they were all talking, and then the bottle came out, and then she can say, holy cow, 6 months ago mom was talking about this really special bottle, and here it is in front of me. And now we can have this really great story that mom is with us, and she's thinking about us. She knew that dad saved this bottle for 20 years.
Right.
Wow.
So
yeah, I was wrong for 6 months. I was completely wrong about the bottle for 6 months until that day when he brought it out.
Well, it's like the thing with the rolling ring, with the roller skates. The reason why it was so important was, didn't that person get an attachment in the rolling ring, and they wanted him to be, so that was like an important thing that they wanted to bring out.
Somebody from their family, or somebody was coming through to tell them that that's where it had come from. It started from that location, and they were trying to indicate the place by showing the roller skates, but that meant nothing to her when she got the reading.
They didn't think about
and
it.
when you came back around to him, he answered the question. When he said roller skates in the rink, we all looked at each other.
And then it all made sense. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. All right, so let's take a look at your next one, Scott.
Oh yeah, what's the next one? So this one is cool. So if you guys, if the listeners have been paying attention, law enforcement based. The young girl on the left, her name is Jane, and she was murdered in the mid 1970s here in New Jersey. A friend of mine did a traffic stop at about 1:30 in the morning on one of our highways. He stopped the car for erratic driving. He thought he was going to have a drunk driver. As it turns out, he had a man who decided to let his exotic bird fly around the car loose. I don't know. We see a lot of strange things on the road. So my friend thought it was funny. He took out his iPhone and he was like, "That's funny. This is what you're looking at on the right side is the outline of the passenger side mirror on the exterior. And then you see there's a figure in there. So that's blown up and enhanced a lot. I have a lot of pictures of this, but I figured this would be the best one for us. And in this photograph, that if we were to zoom out of it, there's a bird hanging out of the passenger side window. Pretty funny. Takes the photo, doesn't think anything of it. And about a week later, he contacts me and he's like, dude, I know you're like into this ghost stuff. He's like, do you see anything strange about this photo? And I laughed. I was like, you're not going to fool me. That's a bird hanging out of the window. And he laughed. He's like, no. He's like, look in the mirror. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, what is that? So I zoomed in on it a little bit. I cleaned it up a little bit. And I said, oh, it looks like a young woman in a white dress standing there. That's interesting. Where was this photo taken? So he told me and gave me the story. And said, okay, let's see if we can find some rational reasons as to why this would happen. So we liberated a police car, and we parked it right where he had parked his, same lighting conditions, put another vehicle in front of it, and took about 100 photos. We were unable to replicate that photograph. Even though it wasn't the same make and model of car, we were fairly certain that we should have been able to get close, and there was nothing. So we went to the next thing, and I said, well, let's see if we can find any tragedies that might have happened in this area of the highway where a young woman died. And it took, we must have looked for about 6 hours, just nonstop Google searches, going through some of the archives and things like that. We couldn't really find anything, which was strange. But what happened was we were not looking in the right place. But what did happen was about a month after I kind of gave up, I didn't know what else to do with it. I was doing a reading for somebody in town, and this person had lived here for their whole life, and she's about 65 years old or so. And I was talking to her about the photo, and I showed it to her, and I told her where it was taken, and she was like, oh, that's Jane DeRua. And I said, well, who's that? And she said, oh, it's a young woman who was murdered by a serial killer right here in town. Her body was discovered on what is the Henry Hudson Trail, and it was laying on, at the time, it was a train tracks that had been abandoned. And she gave me the lowdown. I looked up the name, and sure enough, I came up with this girl on the left-hand side. That girl on the left there, Jane, she is wearing her confirmation dress, and it is unfortunately the same outfit that she was found wearing when she was located after gone missing. So it seems that she the story gets a little bit more strange. She was showed up apparently in this photograph here on the right, and unfortunately what had happened was about a week after the picture of the ghost was taken, about a quarter mile down that same path, there's an apartment building, and a 12-year-old girl met the same fate, almost exactly the same way. An older man took advantage of her and then murdered her and dumped her body out onto the trail. So it was, I believe, some sort of cry for help to let us know that something was going to happen. Being a victim of the same sort of crime, I think she knew that something was going to go on, but we just had no way to put those puzzle pieces together fast enough to act. So this led us on a much larger path, and we found out that there were more girls that are missing from this murderer named Robert Zirinsky. He is one of I believe he's New Jersey's first serial killer. I could be wrong. He, I believe, owned up to murdering and sexually assaulting probably about 8 women, young women from New Jersey, and there are some that he never claimed, but we believe he was involved with because they went missing from the same area. But he passed away in prison in 2007 from cancer, I believe, and they linked. Thank God that the police department in the 70s had the wherewithal. They saved her garments in a brown bag in storage in the police evidence, and in the year 2000. One of our police officers and the local prosecutor did some cold cases, and they took her evidence and did DNA matches, and they matched it to that guy Zirinsky, who was already in jail for doing the same thing to other girls. So they were able to close Jane's case at least. But the timing of the officer taking that photograph of the ghost and then it happening again was so strange. and it led us into this path of all kinds of other stuff.
Wow, interesting. So is he the gentleman in New Jersey that he led police to the 8 graves that he was convicted for? He showed them where the bodies were, but then he said there were more, but he wouldn't take them anywhere. Is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a real piece of work, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what was the timing of the photograph of the ghost in the mirror compared to the actual event that occurred? Was it before you saw this, after?
It would have, like, before the anniversary, you mean?
Well, you said there was a second one, and I'm trying to match.
Sure. This happened. Jane happened in the 70s, and the recent girl happened, I think it was 2017. So there's that huge gap of time.
When was the picture?
Yeah, I'm trying to compare when it happened in 2017 to when the picture was captured,
taken
in the car.
That picture that was taken happened in on the right side there happened. I want to say I was in Tennessee, so I think it was taken in August sometime, and then a week later after that is when it happened to the other girl. Is that right? Yeah. And Jane's murder happened in November in I think 75 or 76.
Okay. Thank you for answering. I was just trying to see if maybe it had already happened and she was coming to you guys as a warning or letting you know.
No, it happened prior, which, like, everybody asked, like, well, why didn't she just reach out to you? And to be quite honest with you, I wasn't even in the area. Like I said, I was in Tennessee, so I was halfway across the country. There was no way that I was going to get that kind of information. And it was just one of those things where I have to ask, like, was there somebody trying to reach out for help? I mean, if you're reaching out for help, who better than the opportunity of a police officer who took his camera out? If you're truly there and you're witnessing this happen, and you know that a quarter mile down the road there's another man that's thinking about perpetrating such a crime, who else would you cry out to but a law enforcement officer? And the one that took the photograph, he happens to be one of my best friends, and he is such a good guy. Like, he's the guy anybody would go to for help. So I just think it was just a matter of we just couldn't do anything. Unfortunately, life isn't TV, so.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. Thank you for answering that, though.
Yeah.
The guy driving the car was unrelated to anybody having to do with this whole experience?
He had nothing to do with it.
Wow.
It was just her taking an opportunity moment to step forward.
Yep, it's taking the opportunity, you know? Yeah. Kristen says, has she been seen since? No. But we are working on some other things that I can't really talk about at the moment, but hopefully we'll get some more closure from Jane in the future here.
Well, and we talk about relevance and significance too. I mean, she popped up in an area that it had happened in the past, and it was about to happen again, almost in the same way.
Yep.
It correlates. It was almost like her giving a warning. It's starting to happen again.
Not only that, but Jane's home is within a rock's throw of that apartment building too. Because she was on her way home from her aunt's house, and she always took these abandoned tracks that were pretty safe. She ran into the wrong guy at the wrong time, and basically, she probably stays in that family home, I would guess. And hopefully, sometime in the future, I'll have the opportunity to speak to her surviving family and respectfully talk to them about all this, and hopefully bring them some closure and tell them this amazing story.
Hey, really quick, guys, in about 9 minutes, UNX is going to switch over to their other audio program, but we're going to stay with you live on YouTube and Facebook and continue with Scotty. He's got some good evidence coming up to finish off, and don't forget about his shameless plugs. We'll be doing those too, so stick around. All right, Scott, let's go to the next one. Go ahead, John. Ron?
Yeah, I want to ask real fast too, because I know where Scotty's knowledge base is, and he's a very intelligent investigator. He knows his stuff. So did it occur to you in this situation where she came before that event was to happen again with another young lady, that it has anything to do with the fact that we talk about in the realm of spirit or dimension or wherever they are, that everything is a state of probability and there is no linear time. So in fact, for us, it was coming in as maybe a premonition kind of experience beforehand, but in her subjective experience, no.
Right. For her, it may be always happening. And for us, it was just at a moment before.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very possible, which is unfortunate because it means that they're witnessing everything over and over again. And since we've passed that moment in time, now we've missed that opportunity, but maybe sometime in the past we'll be able to fix it, or by doing a little bit more research and talking about it, and maybe somewhere in the world of the spiritual, we could do some healing and helping. But that's something that I'm hoping we can accomplish in the future. Like I said, she hasn't, I live very close to that spot, and I've gone to where they found her and where that photo was taken. And I've made it very clear that she has an open line of communication. If she wants to talk to me, I'm here and I'm willing to listen and help her if I can. And so far she's not reached out. So I think for now, it's okay until we're ready to do the next step.
Well, and then that's huge too, Scott. That's you're reaching out to help her and give her that open line of communication, because if she is living those scenarios over and over again, she's not only trying to help others, but she's also trying to ease her own suffering. And by you leaving that line of communication open, that's huge.
Yeah. So what we're here to do, we got to help the living and those on the other side. I mean, they do a tremendous amount helping us. So
true that. All right. So let's take a look. Talk to us about this one, Scott.
Oh, this is such a cool photo. This one is kind of mind-blowing. This is from North Carolina. Now, I got to preface this by saying I never got to this location. I was walking around on eggshells with this family because it seemed like there was some mental health issues, but they were genuinely in need of help. So the person I was working with at the time was contacted, and he pretty much had zero idea what to do with these people. I think the situation was a male in his 40s, his wife, and his mom all lived together in basically like a very tiny bungalow on a big piece of property in North Carolina. And he was being subjected to the most horrific type of paranormal attacks that I think could be described. He sent photographs, which I didn't include, but basically he had photographs of what looked like somebody taking a fork with big fork tines and dragging it across his skin and making big gashes on him. And it looked really gnarly, and I had a really tough time believing that this was some sort of entity or ghost, because I had never witnessed anything like that. Normally we see, and it looks like the really thin razor blade cuts and those sorts of things, which even then, unless we witness them happen in front of us, it's difficult to verify. But they swore up and down that this was the truth, and I started asking a lot of questions. And one of the things that the woman said to me that was really intriguing was that every day she would take the chair off the table and put it on the floor, and when she would go to bed, by the time she woke up in the morning, the chair would be back up on the table. And since I'm a medium, I said, you know what? What's it look like right now? And she's like, well, I stopped bothering putting the chair on the floor because it just goes on the table again. I'm tired of it. So I just leave it up there now. I said, okay, do me a favor. Take a photograph of that room and send it to me. I'd like to see it and see if I can get a psychic reading off of it. She agreed. In about 30 seconds, she sent me this. And I said, who else lives with you? And she said, nobody. It's me, his mom, and him. And I said, okay, then who is in this photograph? And she said, there's nobody in that photo. And I said, yes, there is. There's somebody underneath that chair. And she said, no. And I said, why don't you take another look at it? And then I drew, unfortunately, I totally messed up. And I drew on the original digital picture that I had, and I didn't have a backup of it. So all I have is this with my writing on it. But I wrote on it with a stylus, who is this? And I pointed. And she freaked out, and she she calls me and she's like, it's got to be the devil. It's got to be the devil. There's nobody in this house. It's just me. I swear to God. And I was like, okay. So I took a really close look at it, and it looks like there is a young female with a short haircut wearing a tie-dye t-shirt hunched under there. Now, this is where it got really creepy, and this is where being a good investigator comes in. She gave me her address, and I really started doing some digging. And as it turns out, and this is really scary, on the outskirts of their property, if I remember right, it was within like a half a mile on the outskirts of their property. Back in the 90s, the police found a mass grave of 13 or 14 people, and they have no idea who they are or how they got there. But somebody stumbled upon a skull, and then they were like, okay, let's investigate it. And they started looking, and they found all these bodies, and they have no idea where they came from, who they are, no IDs, nothing. But they were modern people, and they were buried there. So I'm wondering to this lady, I'm like, I wonder if these are people that are reaching out for help from that grave, but I couldn't get anything from it. And unfortunately, I didn't have the funds to go to North Carolina, and they didn't have the funds to bring me there. So we found a local priest that I explained the whole thing to him, and he took me at my word that this was a place that needed some help. And he went into their home and blessed it and did all the things. And apparently it stopped. I haven't heard back from them, unfortunately, but this still to this day, when I look at it, gives me the heebie-jeebies. And I really kick myself for not just maxing a credit card out and going there. But I do have a wife that I have to worry about, so I didn't do that. But these days I could do that, but then I just couldn't. But this is one of those things, like it's just a head scratcher. And this lady was to me, she seemed, aside from the socio-economical problems of their situation, they seemed like good people. They didn't say anything to me that seemed like outrageous or outlandish. Like I've heard some really wild stories, and I'm like, there's no way this is true. Aside from the really deep scratches that were happening, that's one of those things where I had to take them at their word that it was. And then this photograph sort of says to me, like, there was something really there. And hopefully the gentleman who went in and blessed the house was able to put up not only a strong enough guard against whatever's there, but also give them the faith that they had power enough to keep whatever was away from them. And that's really something important that we're, I think, all noticing, is that it's not just about us going in and saying, like, this house is clear. It's about giving the person who's experiencing it also the power to say, right, I can control this from happening, and it's not going to if I don't want it to. Right. So, yeah.
How long did it take for you to realize that these impressions you were getting, these thoughts that were coming to you, were legitimate, and that you could actually give people information based off of what was coming to you? How long did it take before you went, okay, wait, I'm not just imagining this. This is happening?
I would say it was a good year, and probably, no exaggeration, 200 to 250 free readings of people just sitting down with me and letting me see what I get when they sat with me. And it had to be a solid pattern of, like, a name, how somebody passed, what they looked like, something important to them in their life. And then those, from just doing it repetitive. Again, I set out kind of to disprove it, but the more I did, the more it just proved that it was. And I was sitting with people from all walks of life, from law enforcement officers to doctors to just regular people that are just among us. And some of them were really cool, because they would get, some of them were what I call like professional psychic seekers. And some of the compliments these people gave me were like, yeah, I sat with John Edwards and he didn't do half as good as you. Like, okay, make my head blow up. So I was like, all right, so there's something to it. So it took a lot, but and then it takes a lot of bravery to step out and say, like, I can do this. And then I always say, everyone is a job interview. So every person I sit with, every new client, I have to show them that this is a real thing. And that's so I'm still doing it. I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to figure it out as we go.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Got a question for you, Scott. At what point did you, being law enforcement, fact-based driven, at what point did you stop feeling like you were nuts?
I still don't actually feel completely like I'm not nuts.
Yeah, honesty. I'll take honesty for 300. Yeah.
Because I cannot explain yet the mechanism. I can't explain it. I know that if I meditate and use binaural beats and hone in on something in particular, I can make something happen. But I don't know the actual mechanism of what it is. So I still feel kind of crazy. But especially when you're talking to other law enforcement officers, guys with the crew cut and the squared jaw, and they're like, prove something. And you're like, okay. And you tell them about, I'm not going to reveal anything, but you tell them about something super specific, and they're like, okay, actually don't ever look at me again because I'm afraid you know my secrets.
It's interesting because I asked that question because I had a message that I had to give to some really good friends of mine about a week ago. And the first thing I said, and these are friends that I would reach out to for anything. And first thing I said is, please don't think I'm crazy.
That's pretty much how I start all of my conversations.
All right, guys, let's go to the next one. Let's start with this one. I'm going to have, these are videos. We won't be able to talk through them, Scott, but we will talk about them after. So let's go ahead and start this one.
So if anybody's ever been ghost hunting with me, I use that word loosely. Ghost hunting. It's silly, but I like to have a good time. I like to party. I like to have fun. Being stale during an investigation hardly ever yields any results. So that was taken. That's an EVP from Rolling Hills Asylum. We were up in this room that was known as George's room, and it was so dead, and there was nothing happening. And I don't want to ever taunt anyone, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep the place is very. If you've never been there, it's this really well kept asylum, and it's really cavernous, especially when there's only about 6 people there. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep calling out to this guy George, and hopefully he'll yell at me to be quiet. So I started yelling just like that, George, and every couple of minutes I'd be like, George. And then upon listening to the review, actually one of my friends that works with me on the job, he was like listening back to everything. He was so excited, and he was like, "This ghost said your name," and that was it. It was him saying, "Scott." Like, fine, I'll answer you if you'll just shut up.
So let's play it for the audience. So for the audience, you'll hear Scott saying George, and then it's that little whisper in the center of the recording. So here we go.
George. Listening back, maybe he said stop.
I heard Scott.
But I thought that was so cool because I was like, okay, I was calling his name, and then he eventually answered and said my name back. So it's somebody sentient. He could hear me. Which, working with Juan and Lourdes, I have learned a tremendous amount about timing and relevance. So it's not just a coincidence that I'm Scott yelling at George and he says my name. There's more to it. It was exciting because it was the first time I ever heard a ghost or a spirit or an entity or an energy say my name. Thought it was great. So I love that piece of evidence. It's really neat.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Very much so.
All right, let's go ahead and take a listen to this one.
Loud bang on camera was me. Where are you, Ryan? Yo, something downstairs just fucking moved, dude. Bro.
That is awesome.
Okay. That was such a wild experience. I have since I didn't know how much time we were gonna have, but I have since deconstructed that video a bit, and you can't see it too well, but when it's slowed down, and I'll tell you the whole story, but as that camera comes down, a black shadow shoots up across frame and down. So basically what happened was I was called into a home. There's a long story behind it, but basically I'm called in. A young man is experiencing something that I thought was a psychosis. I had his family check him into a psychiatric ward at the hospital because of the outlandish things that he was saying. Once they did that, I thought maybe whatever they were experiencing would stop. However, that wasn't the case. He was gone for 24 hours and things in the house were still happening. And one of the main claims was that things were slamming, which I thought was interesting. So I didn't, unfortunately, the first night I went there, I didn't have another investigator to go with me. So I had to go alone, which I don't recommend anybody watching to do that. But I am sometimes very dumb, and I did this. So I went into the stranger's home alone, and I met with this family, and I said, okay, who's here with us? And it was these two folks, and they said, it's just us two in this house and you. And I said, okay, good. So we have a lay. There's nobody else here. And we're downstairs, and they're telling me about some of the things that would happen in the house. And door slamming was pretty much the number one thing since he had left. So while they're telling me that, a door upstairs slammed shut, and it shook the house. And I said to them, I thought you told me I was the only person here besides you two. And before the words could come out of my mouth, the young man who was with us was out the front door. Like, he left a cloud smoke, gone, done. He was not having it. And the girl looked at me and she kind of laughed, and she's like, yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So I said, okay, I'm going to go upstairs. Is that cool? And she said, yep. So I went upstairs. It was very sparsely furnished. There was not much up there. It was one bedroom, two bedrooms, one bathroom, and a hallway. I went through everything. There was definitely nobody else there. All the windows were shut. There's no cross breeze, no draft, nothing. I couldn't figure out why a door would slam like that. As a matter of fact, I didn't even find a shut door. So I thought that was strange. So I said, okay, seems like there might be something to it. I'm not picking up anything psychically. I'm going to get my partner. We're going to come back tomorrow night. Can I have the house alone? And they said, here are the keys. Let us know when you're done. And that was that. So the next day I came back with my buddy Brian McCauley, who's a fantastic seasoned veteran of the paranormal. He and I started at the bottom. We did the usual kind of stuff. We weren't getting any results. So I took that was a phone camera. So it was, I think it was this phone actually that I'm talking to you guys on now. I set it up in a tripod in a cage. This tripod I use it all the time. It's never given me a problem. And I set it up. I put it on the stairs looking at a static dome because they said that they also felt like they heard people coming down the steps sometimes. So put a piece of equipment there to hopefully capture it. We went upstairs and we were using another camera to film while we were up there. And what I did was I went into the bathroom, and like I said, it's very scarcely decorated. There was not much furniture. So I went into the bathroom and I was like, I know what makes me angry at home. I was like, when the kids slam the toilet, it makes me so mad. So I was like, if this ghost doesn't like things slamming, that's what I'm going to do. So I went into the bathroom, and that really loud bang at first is me mashing the toilet seat down. And I marked it. That really loud bang on camera was me. And as I said that, that's when the whole camera rig got knocked over, and you heard my excitement because I was like, holy crap, something got knocked over downstairs. And we went down and found the whole, not just the camera out of the cage, the entire tripod had been knocked over, and there was no explanation for it. So I was really stoked, obviously. I was glad my phone didn't break, but I was even more happy that the whole thing had gotten knocked over. And probably within the last 3 months, I had been looking at it, and I I was like, you know what? Let me slow this down to like a snail's pace and see if there's anything in frame. And sure enough, I think I posted it on my TikTok. You can see that as the phone falls, this black shadow shoots up, over, and down across the frame as it's falling, as if like something was like, whoop, let me try to get out of here. And it's really neat.
Who wants to see it again?
Yeah, play it again.
All right, here we go.
Say it again, Sam.
Loud bang on camera was me. Where are you, Rye? Yo, something downstairs just fucking moved, dude. Bro!
Like the bro.
I'm so excited. I'm still excited.
I want to point something out to the audience. That's an authentic reaction from a guy in law enforcement who is a medium doing a paranormal investigation. That is an authentic response to something going down. That is awesome.
Yeah, if you had heard the claims from that house, seeing birds in the house, thinking his brother was the devil, scratching and clawing at the walls. And as a matter of fact, unfortunately, one of the most exciting things that happened, I was unable to capture on camera because it had died, but we didn't want to stop the investigation, was later that night, after pretty much nothing else after that had happened, Brian and I were sitting in the hallway next to each other with our backs to the wall. And he was texting somebody else, like trying to bounce ideas off of them about what he thought it was. And I was sitting with my eyes closed. And I just had this feeling wash over me. And I said, Brian, what do you think about this thing being a jinn? And as soon as I said it, 3 different REM pods in the house went off simultaneously.
Ooh. Ooh.
Every one of them max. There was one on the steps, one down in the middle, and one in the bedroom. And they all went off. And both Brian and I almost jumped out of our skin. And what he was really interesting, he was like, are your eyes closed? And I said, yeah, why? And he said, because I was just texting to this other person. I think we might be dealing with a jinn. And I said, what gave you that idea? And he said, I don't know. I just feel like it might be. So we did a little bit of more digging on the young man that was being afflicted. And oddly enough, he had just made friends with another young man of the Muslim faith, and they had been doing some sort of occultism through that religion, and it may have been something that he brought home.
Wow.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes
Wow.
sense.
Yeah. So we came up with this word, and then we did some more investigating and asking questions. And as soon as he was like, they were like, yeah, he made friends with so and so, and then we did a little bit of digging and what they've been up to recently, and we kind of hit it. So the doctors treated him for what they were a crisis, basically, which was the right thing to do. Obviously, always medicine and a doctor. But then we were able to treat it on the other side and come up with some solutions to alleviate the issue of a possible jinn. And they hadn't called back, so I think we did a good job on that one.
So maybe his psychosis was the jinn playing tricks on him.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the claims to fame of the jinn is to play
Right.
tricks and be really mean-spirited too. So, when you're explaining to a family, not only are you dealing with possibly a paranormal entity, don't even think about the word ghost. This is the Middle Eastern version of a demon. Like, I don't even, like, it's a hard pill to swallow, but everything lined up, and I was able to bring them from soup to nuts on what it was, and they were happy with the explanation.
Yeah, there are schools of thought that think that everything from paranormal activity with ghosts, or especially demonic stuff, right on down to extraterrestrial stuff, cryptid stuff, is all possibly jinn shape-shifting and being responsible for, some people believe all of it, but whether that's an extreme opinion or not, but they do think that it could be the explanation behind a lot of these different things. And they're supposedly interdimensional. There are some who believe that the story of Lucifer was, in fact, that he was not one of the angels. He was an exalted one of the jinn.
It very well could be. I mean, it's again, important to keep an open mind and do a lot of research and keep an open mind while you're doing the research, because to say that any one thing is absolute and correct is to cut yourself off from the other possibilities. So we have to remain open to it. Just because it's not my belief doesn't mean it's not true.
Right.
And that's important.
Right.
Great point. Great point.
Genghis Khan, one of our fantastic viewers, specified, I think it was, so did Wendy Hayes. They asked about, maybe it was Genghis that asked, somebody asked about jinn, and then so it was defined that it was of an Arabic background. Scott mentioned that they are oftentimes considered to be tantamount to what a demon is, pre-Islamic or even religious. Right. So our viewers, being as educated and astute as they are, defined it. But yeah, and they are supposedly no joke.
Yeah.
And they want to remain they don't want to be revealed or detected. They don't. That's the tail on the street.
Or the preferable spirit is mixed with tonic and lime.
That's my favorite.
That's my favorite, yeah.
Yeah, so that's why when I said the word, it was almost like I called it out, and it maxed out all the REM pods, and that's what I was like. That's got to be right. Nothing else would. Like, it's like, saying it by its name. I caught it by the tail by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people watching who might be interested in learning more about what the whole phenomenon and possibilities of jinn, the late great Rosemary Ellen Guiley had a few books. I've read them. When she dove into it, sadly she's no longer with us, but she was an authority on everything you could know about the jinn and the history of them, and it's sobering to think that there's any realism or possibility to that at all. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just saying that the possibility alone, if you read about them, is staggering. It's frightening and humbling and exciting all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, Anne-Marie Guiley is where I came up with a solution for the family. I used some of her guidance from one of her books, and I said, this woman is the authority. I was like, we should apply what she's saying, because it wasn't really in my wheelhouse, but I am here to help. So I was like, this is the authority. And like you said, she had so many great books on it. I read through a bunch of her stuff, and I was like, okay, we can take some of this stuff and really apply it here in a simple way to make it work. And it did. So that's one of the most important things, I think.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, we got one more piece of evidence for Scott, and then we've got time for Scott's shameless plugs. All right, so here we go. Here's the last clip.
Had to be hot, cold.
What the?
Here and cold turns off. Had to be hot, cold. Here and cold turns off. Had to be hot, cold.
Did you?
Nice catch. That one's hard to
Yeah,
hear.
that was great. That was great.
If you go to my YouTube, you'll hear that in a much clearer fashion. So that was taken at my home away from home, the infamous haunted Shanley Hotel.
Yep.
It was my first time I had ever been at the Shanley Hotel. And one of my favorite things since I've been doing this is people will be like, this place is so haunted. Wait till you get there. And then I get there and I'm like, I don't think this place is haunted. I don't say that anymore publicly, what I think is and isn't haunted. But I've gone to some places and I'm like, I don't think there's anything here. But the Shanley Hotel, immediately upon entering it, I was like, oh my God, this place is overwhelming. So I broke out. I was already late to an investigation. It was a private one with myself and my team at the time. I showed up at 9 o'clock at night and I was like, well, everybody's already doing their thing. I better put my rig together and get going. And they were just going down into the basement. So I had a Galaxy Note 8 with a Rode mini microphone and a cage and a little light on it, I think. And that's what I was using to record. And I was always just trying to grab cool shots to edit into the vlog. And we went downstairs, down the basement, and they have that handwritten note and it says, do not enter on it. So I took the cage and I was like, oh, cool. We're going to just take a nice little B-roll of that for later. And as I went across it, I heard in my ear, it said, do not enter. And I was like, who the hell said that? And I'm looking, and everybody else that would have said it is like looking down at their phones or getting their gear ready, and nobody's looking at me. And I was like, nobody said that. So I rewound it really quick, and it was right there, clear as day, do not enter. Something legitimately saw me going to take the shot and read it to me. as if I couldn't read it. And that other noise that you hear in there is also part of the EVP, but I didn't hear that as disembodied voice. There's like a kind of sound that wasn't there. Now, what gets even better is after the basement was done, on the way up, I was like, there's no way that'll happen again. So I took the same shot and I didn't hear anything. But upon review later on, I heard, keep going. Like it told me to go, keep going, it said. And I was like, holy crap. And that whole night at the Shanley Hotel was just like that. It was the first time I had ever heard a disembodied voice. But not only did I hear it, but I had captured it. So how crazy is it the first time you ever hear a disembodied voice that you capture it? And it's, I mean, there are other times where I heard voices that seemed external and there was no one there, but that's hard to discern if you don't have something recording you. Right. It could just be, sometimes we just have that. So it was the first time where I had heard it and captured it. And I was like, this is my favorite, my first one that I could say like absolutely 100%. And it happened in this really cool place. And like Ron Lourdes says, I'm sure you guys all learn, right? Timing and relevance. I was recording the do not enter sign and it says it, timing and relevance right there. It's not a coincidence.
It's not. It's not. It's awesome. And I know that feeling, Scott, because my first disembodied voice was in the Queen Mary and recorded on the recorder. Oh my God. It's a simple no, but I was so happy with that freaking no. I was the only one that heard it. And I'm like, did you guys hear the no? I'm like, no, we didn't hear it. And I was like, I know I heard it. I'm going back. And I went back. I was like, see, I told you it's here. It's there. It's like the best feeling. It's like crazy.
Yes. Isn't that awesome? So I thought that would be fun to share because it's if people are listening and they're listening intently and they have not gone on investigations, or even if you're a seasoned investigator, you should be able to get excited and surprised. And hopefully you have that camera or that recorder rolling so you can get this stuff. It's really amazing. And the more of these things that we compile, the better.
Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot of experiences with disembodied voices like that. It's been once, maybe years ago. This past weekend at the Hoover House, Lawrence and Sarah from Mondo Docs joined us for a second sitting in the little seance Reiki room that Pam Barry has upstairs, where we usually don't set up. And you know how our DRV setup worked. It's when the vocals come through, you hear them hopefully, or you hear something talking, but it gets quiet in between. And it was kind of a quiet moment, and we heard this moan, kind of a female voice from out in the hallway where we weren't. And me and Lawrence picked our heads up in the dark and locked eyes, and we heard it. It's been years since I had it happen once, but it was like, holy cow! It's all the stuff we do and dive into in that moment. It's completely sobering when it happens.
We were at the Ritz Theater last weekend or the weekend before. And I had a disembodied voice, and I thought it was totally rad. If you haven't been there, the Ritz Theater in Hanover, New Jersey, is this really cool old theater. It's operating. It's really cool. Definitely haunted. They have a piano in the lobby, and I always thought I play guitar. I have a keyboard. I don't know what I'm doing half of it. I just like to play, and they had the piano, and I was just jerking around with it. And it was just me and another woman who were standing probably about 8 feet apart from each other. And I stopped for a second and something said, stop it. And I heard it and the woman across from me heard it. So I knew it wasn't like a psychic thing. She looked at me and I was like, you heard that? And she's like, something told you to stop it. And I was like, that's what I heard.
It's cool. It's so cool.
It's actually great you brought that up, Scotty, because there's a really good question in here.
Sure.
Do you ever get something psychically that you thought was audible that was going to be on the EVP?
Yeah. There are times where I've definitely heard something and I'm like, all right, I'll tag it on the recording and be like, okay, I should listen to this because something said stop it. And then I'll go back and it's not there. Now, is it a failure of the recording device? Was it not pointed? Was the mic not in the right direction? Was there something else at play? Did it come in at a frequency that my ear could hear and the mic couldn't? There's always something. So I don't know. It's just one of those things, and this is where the science comes in school, because you need something physically to move the air and to push that sound vibration forward and hit your eardrum. So that's just how we work. So how could something with no mass create that? I don't know. But we pick them up in disembodied voices like that one at the Shanley, and it happened. So I don't know how that happens. So yeah, sometimes we hear things and they're just not recorded, for sure. But it's exciting when we do capture it. It's really cool when we get a good EVP.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also times that we pick stuff up on investigations with other investigators that we hear that they don't. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we were investigating with Tony and Sheree, and I went, "Did you hear that?" And they're like, "No."
But that's what happened with the disembodied voice he heard. Lawrence and him heard it. I didn't hear it. They heard it, but I didn't hear it. So
I think they have the ability to pinpoint an individual.
Yeah.
I mean, just like, if they really had to create a sound wave, now they would pick it up with the human ear. But for the machine, I don't think they need to create any sound air movement to create a vocal. They can put it right to the machine and just have it show up without disturbing air or creating a physical sound wave. If they can do that, there's no reason why they couldn't put it directly, I don't know, into your ear itself or into your thoughts, or make you hear it without an actual physical sound wave occurring.
Right. If we're using consciousness as any part of a conduit with the contact we're making, then if it's part of the collective unconscious, it's very possible that that's how either individuals or everybody who gets that experience gets it. The same way that the air inside a pipe organ is not engendered into the machine, but the manipulation of it is what causes an effect that is detectable. So I think that's Tony's explanation, I think, is spot on. That's probably how that sometimes happened. It was really odd. Me and this guy Lawrence heard the sound or the voice. She didn't hear it at all.
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, that's real weird. So
go ahead, Scott.
I was just thinking maybe it was just targeting the men at that point for some reason.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We're targeting individuals. I mean, the perfect example is when we were investigating the Aho Hospital, and we walked into the surgery room, and I looked at Tony. I went, "There's a woman in here." And you can hear it in the recording. Tony's like, "Oh, really?" And then we got an EVP. She said, "You're right." Yeah, but I didn't hear her. Bell too. Yeah, clear as a bell. It was a Class A, like she was standing right between us. Right. And I didn't hear her say it. It embedded on the EVP, but I felt that she was in the room. But Tony didn't pick up any of it until he did the review. It was like, wow, that's...
Yeah, I sure heard it when we reviewed, because that was loud and clear.
So it's I think it's how they choose to communicate, who they choose to communicate with, and how they embed it into our equipment sometimes, or into our ears. Or
so I think this past weekend when I was with Ron and Lourdes at the Ritz, and Ron was kind enough to say that when I'm around that sometimes they pick up some extra cool stuff. I thought it was really interesting that they had an open line of communication with somebody coming through their setup who identified themselves as James, and they were trying to talk with him. And I'm usually pretty quiet. I have a bit of a big personality, so I try not to take over things. But I finally spoke up and I said something, and we started to get some responses back. So it makes me wonder why certain people do have that connection with the other side, where I wasn't psychically attempting to connect with this person. I was just speaking normally and getting these responses back through the direct radio, which I thought was really fantastic. And it really set a lot of questions up in my brain, which the next day I started hitting Ron up because I have a million things to talk to him about. But is it because I meditate all the time? Is it because I'm in constant spirit communication that they just feel more comfortable? Or is it because I'm speaking some weird underlying language that they get? And then with that, what really, because I have to know things. If I'm sitting here alone in my room, this is where I do all my readings and my mediumship. If it were just me in a house that I know is not haunted, except for one ghost, but not haunted. If I was sitting here with that setup, doing mediumship on my level, and I'm picking up the things that I pick up, that I can verify, what information am I missing that the digital part would be making up for? So I could say, I close my eyes and I say, I'm looking at a package of Oreo double stuffed. It seems really important to the person. I can taste the chocolate. This is important for them to know. And as I'm saying that out loud, possibly the DVR, the DR direct radio voice says hydroxy cut, or something else, and it's like, it wasn't Oreo, it's hydroxy cut. But I was missing that because I know Oreo. You know what I mean? And that's a really simple version of what I'm talking about. Or I could be saying, hey, I'm getting the symbol for law enforcement. I can see the badge, and I say that, and possibly a spirit says corrections officer. And it's like, oh, okay. So now I'm using my abilities and that technique, and we're taking the two and we're combining them and making this really amazing connection where both of us were getting half of the story and we're connecting it better now. And I think through you, and I think some of you guys up here do this as well, right? You use the same method. So if you're getting a piece of the story, what else can we do to put it wholly and more better together?
Right. To try to get the complete story. Yeah.
That was fantastic that night when you started talking. The voice, James or whoever it was that was saying James, started talking. He said your name.
It said his name.
It said your name, and then dialogue did kind of transpire after that. And for people who don't know, that is one of the things that we love working with you. Not only are you gifted and you work great with other people, but you are very much a part of the whole event and the whole process. You'll have your moments, but you fuse and assimilate into what other people are doing. And I think that's one of the reasons why what we do works so well in your presence, because you, like us, are constantly connecting with spirit. I think that's why Tony and Cherie and Chris and Audra get good stuff on EVP or direct radio also, because we do it frequently. And so I think when somebody like you is entered into our equation, that's why it probably is heightening what is happening.
Because you work with us. It's a together thing, and we work together, and that's why it works so well. Yeah. But that was kind of cool because I didn't say Scotty at all until he started talking, and it went, "Hi, Scott."
That was so wild. Again, just one of those things. Like, I can't explain it, but it got my brain like, okay, how are we gonna do this more and figure it out? Because, and again, some of the evidence that you guys were showing that night, I don't think I'd ever heard before, and it was really blowing my mind because it didn't sound like it was just ghosts. It sounded like there was more stuff out there that was talking, which maybe I call a spirit guide, and it could be something else. And I could say, are you a spirit guide? And maybe your method would be like, if you want to call us that, It just like that. And that's what got me set up on the mediumship stuff or the psychic stuff, and trying to just understand it and pushing it to the very edge of what I could prove.
Yeah, see what Anthony, can you put Anthony Seminelli's comment up on the screen? There you go. You're getting it now, Scott. See, DRV can work together with psychic. 100%. Anytime we work with talented mediums, and we've worked with a few, the cat had to go. Here he is, the podcat. He's in.
Hey, buddy.
The podcat.
The podcat. Anytime we've had the chance to work with very talented mediums, and we're friends with a few of them, Scotty being one of them, that is something that I always felt happens, is that we embolden each other's position and our evidence and our body of work. And if you work in tandem or in lockstep, I think it's fascinating when those kinds of things happen. That night, Scotty sat through the whole opening part of the DRV, didn't say anything, just took it all in. He starts talking, going, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then boom,
dialogue.
His name comes out, and the dialogue starts. That's hard to dismiss as accidental, in my opinion.
Yeah, so super cool.
More than hard. That's an impossibility.
Yeah.
I mean, to have the mathematical probability of having that happen, due, like you said, to timing and relevance, billions to one. I mean, that's more than, that's no coincidence.
Nope. through pure white noise.
Yeah.
Right? Pure white noise, no sweeping, no radio, just pure white noise.
I didn't realize that night that there were file footage that we showed, because we were showing stuff to Daryl Marston that night, who had worked with us for the first time. And I didn't realize that some of those clips Scotty hadn't seen before, but Scotty was glued to the screen. And we had a really intense discussion with that guy, Jess, that night that covered all different facets of science and philosophy and consciousness. And I went home going, I don't think I know anything anymore.
Yeah, he had fun. No, but you had fun. He had fun. Yeah, he had fun.
That guy just was blowing my mind. He was like fluent in it, in that type of, and it was like listening to somebody who's really like us, who is a seeker of knowledge and truth and wants to understand, and had not just like, I want to understand this because I believe it. I want to understand it because I want to understand it. It's just like a thirst for that knowledge and that unknown, which is so awesome. And none of this can be wrong or right. It just is. And I love it.
And Scott, how else was he like us?
I don't know. He was much taller. He was much more handsome. He looked like he looked like a WWF wrestler. I don't know.
He was a clown. He was a clown, just like us.
He was a really good, goofy guy. We had a lot of good times there.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, we have reached the part of the show we called Shameless Plugs. Scott, go ahead and tell us where people can find you. Where can they get readings? Where can they watch you on TikTok, YouTube? Where are you at?
Alrighty, so the shameless plugs. This is fun. TikTok is easy. It's the same name you see here, Scotty the Medium. For most places, Facebook, same thing. Instagram wouldn't let me drop the NJ, so it's Scotty the NJ Medium if you want to hang out with me there. YouTube, same, Scotty the Medium. And if you want to see me on any cool stuff, as a matter of fact, if any of you have Travel Channel, tomorrow night at 7 p.m., you can snuggle with your boo and watch The Devil's Doll on Travel Channel. It's an episode where I help one of our fellow paranormal investigators in her haunted doll. I was happy to do that. And you can see me on a couple other Discovery shows. What else? Eli Roth Presents, My Possessed Pet. Not my favorite, but it was fun. And Paranormal 911, Season 1, Episode 10, I believe it's called, Dark Passenger. And if any of you fans out there know who Sam and Colby are, you can catch me on their episode of the Shanley Hotel. That was a lot of fun too.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Well, Scott, thanks for coming out and joining us this week. We are going to definitely have to have you back because you are a fantastic guest. Not only did we have a ton of people watching, but man, you kept them riveted the entire time, and we actually went longer on this show than we do most. So that's fantastic. We appreciate you coming out.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was a real blast. I cannot wait. I'd love to be back.
Oh, we'll definitely have you back. We'd like to go through the list of everybody that was in the audience and say thank you. But, man, that would take another hour and a half because Scott brought in a ton of people tonight and did get a great job about it. Thank you all for coming out again. We will be here same time, same channel, same people. Audra will be back next week. She had to work a little bit too much this week and she got to travel this weekend, so she was a little wore out. But she'll be back next week. Scott, thank you again. Thank everybody for coming out. And, guys, if you want to pick up stuff like Scott does, you've got to wash your hair, you've got to be naked, you got to be in the shower, but most of all, you got to stay haunted. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you next week.
Can you give me a name? What's your name?